Wala na kola kanina ni eredi. Dai pulawia, iya wia, jana. Pipa wakijeri kudorera manda kanina.
So in the early days of Bernabella School, they didn't have all of the things that you'd normally expect to see in a school. There weren't tables, there weren't chairs, there weren't really even books necessarily, but they did some really good learning nonetheless. They made do with what they had.
Baru na kung kailan ko la work experience pala ni kung sa joda mono craft kolo kimo bakery ka nindiri mono kaya mo daw nindiri.
So one of the things that our grandmothers in that era did, so as they grew, they started to do work experience type things. So things like, you can see them here making cards, handcrafted cards. In fact, Daphne didn't say this, it was thrown in, but her grandmother's name was Cookie, because there was a bakery and that was part of his job. And you know, cleaning, all these other sorts of roles started to become part of their school.
Balada mayo kami kunidi di kola gairi di brigada.
So in the very early days of freedom, this is, as people moved across, this is about 60 odd kilometres to the south of Bernabella, where the previous school was. They established a new community and school, and here is my grandmother as the teacher now, and she's teaching a Year 1 class.
Balu dana nyangada nidi balu tijura nidi federal literacy English mono nampa ko nidi ngai balu dana aat bayanda ko inma kada ko mono ki budi brang kada ko.
So part of the curriculum there was a very diverse curriculum. So they had strong focus on literacy, reading and writing, as well as oral language that was bilingual, so Picadilly literacy and the English language. They worked with maths, art, sewing, leatherwork, singing, games, a whole range of things that they used to do in those days.
Ngayon kami palo bilbado nani mono palo nini cukup ako wakala nini mura dara wakala ni mono mai pudi dara wakala ni kana mandang bilbado.
So this is an image of one way that my grandmother used to teach, and this is through a mode called milpatunani, which is storying in the sand, and through that form of mark making and narrative, she would teach about family and kin and how you related and the terms. She would teach about country and places and the various stories that connect people to each other and to the land. She would share those creation stories, but also about bush foods and all sorts of things, and they're still shared through Milpatunani today. That was obviously a strong pedagogical tool in the 60s.
Kuari dana nindini ulaka waru program banyak waru program yang ada dan play apa mea walkadula program bayani ana mojuda ulo atlara kalau dana ulo walkadula mono ana banyak biar dia curang betul. Kalau dia nak
So this is a suite of resources that we're now using. They've been developed in partnership with Dan Levy, so he's a bilingual Pindara language project officer at the Department for Education in South Australia. And this has become a really important tool that we're using in the schools. And part of these resources were developed. There's a lot of our family who have complex health issues, like they need renal dialysis, for example, and they've had to move to Adelaide. So there's a really strong community. There's a lot of knowledge about our language and our literacy. So that cohort of our community, even though they're sick and a long way away, have been involved in helping to develop these resources that we can use back in our community schools, and also us and others in our community at Urbella have helped develop them. And sadly, you know, this is not, I think these have been around 5 years, and a lot of those people who went to Adelaide for dialysis and whatever are no longer with us. So it's kind of a special resource. So here's an example of where I'm teaching literacy, and we're using the cards as a resource. So not only are they reading, they're practicing their oral language skills, so there's that repetition and mimicking of the teacher for the sound making. And so this is kind of what a lesson using these resource cards looks like when I'm teaching it. So a big focus for our department is on phonics and that kind of way of learning literacy. So we've, through this resource, developed first language sound making resources. Here's an example of me using the PowerPoint slides that go with the resources. And so here we're making the j sound, and I'm teaching the children through PowerPoint as part of the literacy lesson as well. So in this slide you can see a text that features words that start with the j sound, and here the students are making the sounds, and then they go to reading the sounds. We move to writing, and then we move to working with short texts that feature the j sound at the start of a word. And yeah, this is an example. This is an example of the family centre at our school, and so the mothers come in and they are the teachers with the students, and they read to the very young children. They sing songs with the children, first language songs. And they also teach the children explicitly about sound making as they're using these texts.
Learning country, particular Karibe, Tidura, Paludana, Oraka, Nindirikube, language Babu, Eri Jurabu, Ini, Tutabo, Chutu, Unubu, Kokabo, Manda, Monokoyo, Vajuda, Inna Wolo, Monoculture, Nindirikube, putting it.
So a large part of our first language and culture practice and pedagogy is to get out on country and go to the land, which is full of resources for us to do this first language work. So we teach them on the land, we teach them about how the language works, we teach them the old stories and old things about the land, about the names, and reclaiming the very old and diverse names for the things in the environment. And this includes things like the birds, the plants and the trees, the animals, and all sorts of things pertaining to the land, so that the children can reclaim that old language and knowledge that the old people have, but it has to be explicitly taught to the children for that maintenance and continuity. And the other thing we do when we're out on country is to teach about our culture, but also those traditional songs that make up the stories and the songs of the land. They have the dances to them as well. So it's singing for the children so that they can dance. It's them learning the stories that go with the songs and then connecting them to the country that we're on while we're working. And here's an example where we take the kids out on country to learn about the foods on country, bush foods. And so not only just teaching them the names and things like that, but we ask the kids to learn how to dig. In this example, we're getting the kids to dig out witchetty grubs called muckle, and the muckle live in the iwiri, which is the roots. And so teaching the children to dig the roots out, to split the roots, extract the witchetty grubs and getting them to do it for themselves. So it's not just learning the names of the trees and the plants that the foods are found in, but actually getting them to do it and learning by doing it. So on this particular occasion, we waited until there'd been some rain, and although this is a water hole, it's dry, and so you might think, well, there's no water there, but this was an opportunity to take the children out and to show them how to dig for water that's below the surface, because it's there. And so as the children were digging, they started to feel the moisture and then get closer to the water, and so that was a really good opportunity to learn about digging for water when it looks like there's none. It's been a really special part of this project is to bring in 3 senior women who were teaching from the time they were young women. In fact, I'll just add to what Daphne said here. So Akatia, who's in the middle with the lime green jumper, was a contemporary of Naninda in that first slide. So there was 5 women who began teaching at the end of the 40s and early 50s. And Akatia actually went out as a co-teacher with Rowena's grandmother and Nancy Shepherd, who was a white teacher. And she's still going in 2024. And here she is. So Manidano and Kurmanara and Akatia there have been coming in and sharing their stories and knowledge. So getting that intergenerational learning with the children has been wonderful.
Teacher qualified junior sailu langro, mana baru bida bay, bola anak bola keeping safe tera wakati kita mono nindi de di juranga mono balo kware balo nina nyaro kware mono kola ko rawa bijabe di juranga nindi.
Another really terrific part of this approach has been having the support from Katrina Chidai. Katrina Chidai is a qualified high-level teacher through UniSA's program which was called ANTEP. So back in the early 90s she first got qualified and started teaching. She's in a non-school-based role now, but she still regularly comes in, and 20 years ago she developed Keeping Safe curriculum, which was a first language primarily, but it was a bilingual resource to teach that, Keeping Safe curriculum. And so that's part of what she still shares when she comes in. But she's regularly committed to coming back and working with the kids, even though she's no longer based in the school, which is wonderful to have that support.
Language Wangka be kunpu kanya diri yang kuno. Ara ni mana na wangka mana baku jana ni nindi be muno. Mana ku be wangka eri di jura bulu. Saya eri di jura bulu. Wes eri di jura mana na. Kena lang nindi be mimi bangka jura ngaya tas jura muno. Palu mana na cumuru bula wangka bula. Waru program bangka baju muno. Dan pribilo pulo muno after the waka kurang min me bene tura ni ne palu janna wala tura ana na jani dili.
It's something that as Arnold we hold almost as a mantra that we need to keep our language strong, we need to keep our culture strong, and that's why we're just so dedicated. We're just committed with the resources that have come from Daphne. We use those resources, we implement them, we make the most out of them, but we also really, draw those older people in, and we just keep bringing them in and keep, drawing from the knowledge that they have to share, and we don't stop, we keep at it because this is just so important to us, and that's the motivation for us to keep going and exercising these various approaches to